Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Claire Braaten, and today I will be discussing with you chapter one of the crimes of the powerful. Let me share my screen right now, and here, hopefully you see all of this. So, chapter one of this class is basically an introduction to white collar crime and crimes of the powerful. When we look at traditional definitions of crime, it uses the legalistic perspective. When I say legalistic perspective, for those of you who have taken criminal law, legalistic perspective focuses on crime based on definitions of the state. For example, the legislative branch or the executive, they come up with all these bills and laws that determine what behaviors are legal, what are illegal, and among those that are illegal or criminal, what are classified as serious crimes and what are classified as less lesser offenses or minor infractions. So we notice that orthodox criminology generally self-identifies as a scientific endeavor, and because of the way they define crime, then it's inherently biased in favor of definitions of crime that can be quantitatively analyzed. So you'll see this in research in criminology, wherein there's a bias right now for quantitative analysis. For example, in your data analysis class, you'll note that there's a focus on being able to quantify crimes, being able to measure, crime rates, um, like how many people commit serious crimes, the different classifications of crimes. Um, there's a focus on also quantifying the number of victims, and trying to focus on the factors that can determine or predict crimes and offending. Now, one critique of this traditional criminology is that the focus on street crimes reinforces individual, rational, and even moral explanations of criminality. And some critics suggest that there is an inverse relationship between the level of harms caused by a human activity and the level of criminological concern. And by way of example, in criminology, there's too much focus on street crimes, such as property crimes, violent crimes, which, although not to discount the harms caused by these lower level street crimes, the harms perpetuated by crimes of the powerful, such as white collar crimes and corporate crimes, are more. The harms are more in terms of monetary harms, social harms, physical harms, health harms. They're massive compared to these street crimes. These critical critiques of the definition of crime is based on semiology. And semiology is a study which promotes attention to the crimes of the powerful rather than crimes of the powerless. It is essentially the study of harms, including those caused by existing social structures that facilitate crimes of the powerful, such as capitalism, materialism, and social inequality. So what exactly do we mean by power? Conceptualizations of power vary greatly within the social sciences and in sociology and criminology in particular. So definitions can range from the capacity to direct or influence others, or the course of events or resources, and it is a political or social authority or control over others. Basically, power is tied to authority and trust, and it exists only through social relationships and is historically and culturally specific as well as present throughout time. As you can see, it's not really identifiable. It's not simple to define, but it is produced and reproduced within social structures. Power is exercise obtained, legitimated, and maintained through capital accumulation of varying types. For example, economic, military, social, political, discursive, cultural, and intellectual. Now, Edward Sutherland, you should be familiar with him right now. He is the father of criminology, and he defined white collar crime as the crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of his occupation. So traditionally, white collar crime was used to refer principally to business managers and executives. So what Sutherland did was he examined 70 corporations, including Westinghouse, General Electric, and General Motors, using a scientific study to determine how many times the corporations violated and were charged for violating regulatory laws. However, one critic of his study is that he also included crimes committed by non-white collar offenders, such as the farmer and the salesman, shoe salesman. So his study began the debate of what types of crimes should be considered as white collar crimes, as well as what should be considered a crime. And the ongoing debates over this distinction developed over the next 50 years. And this resulted in two divisions within white collar crime, namely corporate crimes or organizational crimes and occupational crimes. There's a distinction in the two categories, as we'll see later. Now, there are shifting definitions of white collar crime. During the 1970s, Watergate and other political scandals led to greater recognition of white collar crime as real crime. During this decade also, the US Department of Justice discovered white collar crime and made it a top investigative priority. They defined white collar crime as those classes of non-violent illegal activities which principally involve traditional notions of deceit, deception, concealment, manipulation, breach of trust, subterfuge, or illegal circumvention. Now, the Department of Justice and FBI's definition of white collar crime altered Sutherland's concept of white collar crime by focusing on criminal acts of non-elite persons. They also adopted an offense-based rather than an offender-based definition. For example, they limited white collar crime to non-violent crimes. Now, Clinard and Richard Quinney bifurcated white collar crime into occupational crime and corporate crime. According to them, occupational crime are offenses committed by individuals in the course of their occupations and the offenses of employees against their employers. So occupational crime is primarily for their personal financial gain, whereas corporate crime are offenses committed by corporate officials for their corporation and the offenses of the corporation itself. So corporate crime is a crime committed for the benefit of the corporation instead of for your personal gain. There are two schools of thought, the Yale School of Thought and the Chicago School of Thought, when it comes to focusing or studying white collar crime. You'll note that the Yale School of Thought, which emerged in the 1970s, focused on primarily middle class crimes, occupational crimes, and street crimes. And they looked at corporate crime or organizational crime as crimes committed during their occupation for their own self-interest or self-gain. For example, a bank teller or a bank employee who's occupied as a bank employee in a bank would divert funds, for example, to his own or her own account. That would be considered as corporate crime under the Yale School of Thought, even if it was not for the benefit of the corporation, but for the employee's own self-interest or self-gain. The earlier researchers of the Yale School of Thought used the US federal court system and identified 8 offenses under federal criminal code as the white collar crimes. These are securities violations, antitrust violations, bribery, bank embezzlement, mail-and wire fraud, tax fraud, false claims, and credit lending institution fraud. So according to the Yale School of Thought, white collar offenders are ordinary middle-class individuals. One critique of the Yale School of Thought is that they remove the notion of status from the definition of white collar crime, and they effectively examined offenses downward, causing them to miss crimes of the powerful. Now, the Sutherland legacy, and as we noted, also looks at corporate crime, organizational crime. Now, what's the definition? What's the difference between organizational versus occupational crimes? Occupational crimes are crimes committed by an individual for one's own self-interest or self-gain. For example, a bank manager embezzling $100,000 from Bank of America to purchase an elegant boat for himself. Occupational crimes are referred to as middle-class crimes and are committed by lower and mid-level employees or people who are relatively powerless compared to the bourgeoisie. Although we will discuss on the chapter on occupational crime, that is not always the case and depends on how one defines the term powerful. On the other hand, organizational crimes or corporate crimes are crimes committed by individuals in the name of and in the interest of the organization. For example, cooking the audit books to increase the stock value and sales. Now, crimes of the powerful and white collar crimes are contested topics. Are crimes of the powerful the same as white collar crimes? The book suggests that crimes of the powerful are far more expansive. And for the book, they include state corporate crime and state crime. So aside from the previous terms, we need to define what state corporate crime is. Kramer and Michalowski defined state corporate crime as illegal or socially injurious actions that occur when one or more institutions of political governance pursue a goal in direct cooperation with one or more institutions of economic production or distribution. Chambliss defined state crime as acts defined by law as criminal and committed by state officials in pursuit of their jobs as representatives of the state. We'll go into this later when we talk about the chapter on state corporate crime. So crimes of the powerful, based on the book, is the interplay between state crime. So it consists of several categories: corporate crime, state crime, and international financial institutional actors. So they expanded to include harms caused by international financial institutions such as World Bank Group or in the International Monetary Fund. And the new area of research on international financial institutions are coined crimes of globalization. Many of the crimes and harms committed by elite and powerful groups do not explicitly operate within a corporation, state, or international financial organization. For example, transnational crimes of organized crime syndicates like arms trafficking frequently require vast resources and power of corporations and states. So these two need to be included in any discussion of crimes of the powerful. The crimes of the powerful also include organized crime and environmental or green crimes. By using crimes of the powerful as the overarching umbrella, the importance of power is made central to and a guiding frame for researching and understanding the various types of crime and harms previously discussed. The book also argues that white-collar crime no longer implies elite status or one's career or social position. What are the scope of crimes of the powerful? This slide simply lists some examples of crimes of the powerful. You have bribery, corruption, cyber warfare, you have electoral fraud, you have human rights violation, illegal mining, market domination, you have price fixing, antitrust laws, for example, and also price gouging. You have torture, unfair labor practices. So you can see that there's a lot of examples under crimes of the powerful. What is the status of crimes of the powerful? Within the past 2 years, there has been abundance of crimes committed by the powerful. So you'll see there's rampant political corruption, campaign finance violations, increased government policies targeting specific religions and marginalized populations, surveillance of citizens' private information and behaviors, assassinations, coup, political and physical oppression, displacement, crimes against humanity, denial of basic subsistence, illegal occupation of territories, organized crime syndicates, and international financial institutions. What are the costs of crimes of the powerful? It's not limited to financial costs. So financial costs alone, though, are a lot, and they far exceed those resulting from additional crimes. And this is because corporations, huge entities are involved. As I mentioned, not just aside from financial costs, there are social, cultural, political, environmental, physical, and mental costs, none of which could be assigned price tags or a fixed dollar amount. Financial costs are included. There are also damages to institutions and moral climate, damages to foundations of democracy, costs to personal health and safety, death, environmental costs, and more. Some examples of harm to personal health and safety of crimes of the powerful include the following examples. For example, companies who violate safety standards for the products and expose their customers to possible injury or health. Physicians conduct unnecessary surgeries and expose their patients to the risk of surgical complications. Pharmaceutical companies conspire to fix high prices and threaten the well-being of those who need but cannot afford their products. Mine and factory bosses who violate health and safety regulations and expose their workers to injury, disease, and death. Companies that manufacture or self-contaminated food products or mislabeled drugs and expose their customers to unnecessary health products. And then this slide looks at state crimes that produce physical injury, and death. So I'll leave you to read this slide on your own. An example would be inhumane treatment of immigrants, including those deemed illegal, and refugees fleeing from war, oppression, and climate change, affecting countless lives. So these are considered state crimes. There are also physical dangers associated with environmental pollution. For example, millions of workers and innocent citizens are forced to live in areas of toxicity and dumping and waste, and are exposed every day to known carcinogens and other potentially lethal substances. And many thousands of industry workers will become ill or die because they work under conditions that needlessly expose them to carcinogens and severe respiratory ailments. Okay, that concludes our lecture for today. Please complete your assignments.